Dragon's Dogma 2 was a game I was anticipating for a long time. Ever since I played the first game back in 2012, I was excited to see what a sequel would look like, especially given that the creators of the game weren't able to completely flesh out everything the way they wanted to, which is something they expressed and something I think is easy to pick up on if you've played the original game. There are a lot of mechanics and general gameplay structure that was missing. This didn't keep the game from being good because the foundation was built, was well made, so the game didn't feel half-baked like other games that weren't able to flesh out all their ideas and mechanics properly. And luckily, Dragon's Dogma 2 is what I kind of wish a lot of games were, a lot of sequels to games I enjoyed were, where they strived to take everything that made the original game good and build upon that instead of kind of tearing it down and just trying to go for a new gimmick or something that would make the headlines catchy or whatever. But before I fillet this game for however long this video goes on, I want to talk about the negatives, because they are few and are greatly outweighed by the positives, but it's something to talk about. The performance issues in this game are something that rightfully left a bad taste in people's mouths during the release of this title, and it's something that's tanked the perception of the game in many people's eyes. And the reason for this bad performance is largely tied to the NPCs and their actions within the world. During my playthrough, the most issues I had in frame rate wise came in highly populated areas, because NPC actions seem to be very CPU intensive, and there's no real way for a player to change anything to make this less of a problem. The hardware I used for this was a Ryzen 3900X, 12 cores, 24 threads. GPU was a 6800 XT, 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and my general sense of memory, 32 gigabytes of RAM, ran on an SSD. Not the latest and greatest, but the oldest components are like 2 hardware generations old. Better than the recommended, so I was surprised when I was in the first major city and the frame rate took a fucking nosedive into the pits of hell, at least initially. As I went through the game, I faced less issues, but it was definitely something incredibly noticeable. And given that, yes, I have a better rig than the recommended, somebody using the recommended hardware, given that one of the CPUs recommended is a 6-core CPU, they're going to face some massive limitations to the point where I could see it not being very playable in a major city. One thing I can say is good is they've talked about fixing the issue. They understand what the issue is and they're working to fix it. And right now, during recording this video, they put out at least one fix, not really dealing with this issue of high CPU utilization, but really just fixing a few gameplay things and some things for the settings. But it's been acknowledged, and I'm hoping that this is fixed in a very timely manner so the game can get a little bit more playable for a lot of people and they can have a good experience with something I think is a wonderful title. And then there's the microtransactions, which if you play DMC5, it's a similar case of that, where there are items, there are resources that you can easily obtain within the game, but they're selling them to you. Something I'm not a fan of. Luckily, it's not something that actually, there's some actual cool stuff behind a paywall, but still, it's something I don't like. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is something Capcom started doing in far more games. I wouldn't be surprised if the next big Monster Hunter game that I think is coming out this year or next year, I don't remember when, has this. And it's a road that's been traveled. You see more and more microtransactions appearing in games over time in places they really shouldn't be. Getting nickel and dimed, especially getting nickel dimed on a $70 game, is never something you want to do. Something you never want to see. Luckily, this is not intrusive. And sadly, we've basically allowed microtransactions to flow in the game so prominently that really, at this point, it's the best you can hope for, that if they do appear, they're not intrusive. And the microtransactions were something that I did not know were going to be in the game before it came out. It's something that when I was on the store page, I had to pre-order this game, something I usually don't do, but when I'm excited for a title, me and my brain gets a little scrambled, and I got a little caught up in the hype. Not even hype, just excitement, or both really. They're basically the same thing, so I don't even know what I'm saying. And when I saw that there were microtransactions, like, ooh, that's rough, buddy. That's not something you want to see. And that's another thing that kind of just tanked the experience of people. Some of it because some people are being hyperbolic about exactly what the microtransactions were, but also because people are rightfully upset whenever they see microtransactions, especially in a single player game. And that's really all I have to say on that particular topic. Now I can kind of go into talking about the positives of the game, which are plentiful. When we get into talking about positives, the first thing I want to start off with is the vocations, which I feel are far better than the last game. They've improved upon things that I had issues with when it came to some of the vocations that returned, and there are some that have been taken away. You're not going to see the Strider because that's been basically separated into 2 different vocations. You're not going to see the Assassin, you're not going to see the Mystic Knight, and you're not going to see the Ranger, which might be sad for some, but overall there are more vocations than the last. Only by like one, but still, that is more. But I would say the vocations we have now are more fleshed out. And I kind of just want to cover each one of them to their own degree. Starting with the fighter, the class that I didn't really like in DD1, of course, because I like to be the one dealing the most damage. And if you're playing a fighter, it's a lot more of a tank, really. It's more about gaining aggro and such. It's your classic sword and board play style, you know, a mix between dealing damage and defending both yourself and the pawns by drawing the attention of your enemies and just doing what you do. But my experience now with fire compared to the original game is way better. I started off with this as my first vocation and I had a super fun time, and I really feel like we got the mix down a lot better with dealing damage and defending this time. If you take your time, you get used to basically deflecting and parrying attacks. So much fun. It's always satisfying when you do it just right and the enemy is put into a state where you can just well on them, especially when you're fighting the smaller enemies. And there are plenty of skills for you to choose from, either focusing on dealing a lot more damage or just really getting your defense together and just being that solid wall for your party. Then we're kind of going into the next one, which is the mage. The mage serves the purpose of being both a damage dealer and a support. You know, they can deal damage through spells, but they can also enchant weapons with different elements, heal, and buff characters. It's a class that I made my first pawn, really my main pawn, I used to say, because I kept my pawn even in New Game Plus. I didn't change it up, and they're the only vocation I think you can't go without having in your party. You know, you could do 3 warriors in one mage and be fine. But if you went all warriors, you could do a lot of damage, but if you get into a harder challenge, you got no healing going for you, you might have a hard time. Then we go on to the archer, and they're really just what they sound like. They got a bow, they deal damage from a long range. You can always kick the shit out of people, just like kick them in the face, stomp them when they're down, and sometimes it's a better option than shooting them, because it deals a pretty good amount of damage. There'll be circumstances where, oh, I shoot this enemy, small chunk of damage. I kick him in the fucking face, and they just go straight down to the ground. Half health bar gone. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. And now I said, when you shoot them, sometimes you get a small chunk of damage. This class does not deal a lot of damage. They can be useful for dealing with flying enemies, but if you're looking to be just destroying things damage-wise, you could get it going, right build, right weapons, upgrading all your equipment. But there are moments where I'm like, this just doesn't compare to the other classes. It's not the worst damage dealer. No, it's not the worst. I'll get to the worst. It just was not the class where I would say I would go with if I just wanted to deal boatloads of damage. I still played it. I had fun. You can have fun with basically any vocation, especially if you understand it well enough and invest time into it. You'll be fine. There's not a vocation that is useless, in my opinion. There are just some that are funner than others. And if you're tackling flying enemies, which there are flying enemies in this game, harpies being the most plentiful and the most annoying you will come across, especially if you come across them on a bridge and they just snatch you up or snatch one of your pawns up. Next thing you know, oh, I'm falling to my death. Terrible time. Good to have an archer around for something like that. Now on to the thief. The thief is basically our replacement, I could say, both for just the strider and the assassin, because the class before this I talked about the archer. Strider was basically that and thief put together, but I think thief does a good job just being its own thing. Sure, you don't have long range anymore like you did when you had the strider, but they make up for it for dealing a boatload of damage, just destroying shit, and they can quickly evade attacks. They have plenty of stuff in their arsenal to deal with anything, whether it's pulling enemies from the sky, whether it's easily toppling over enemies that have already been knocked off balance, whether it's stealing things from the pockets of your enemies or igniting their dual daggers together so they can just do fire damage or even making them explode. If you invest time into thief, you will easily just shred stuff, especially if you have the proper just overall level, proper stats, you know, proper equipment. You're doing good. There ain't much that's really going to stand in your way. Those are your 4 basic vocations. Now let's hop into the more advanced one. The first 2, you can throw these on a pawn and be cool, but the other 4, these are completely exclusive to the Arisen themselves. So you're a main character. Let's start off with the warrior, which is just a powerhouse that focuses on knocking down enemies, stunning them, making them vulnerable to just daily attack. This is the class you go to probably also when you want to roleplay guts and just fuck things up with a massive greatsword. I'll be honest with you, just like I wasn't a fighter player in the original game, I also was not a warrior one either. But now I really had some fun with this, especially because they got good knockdown resistance. So you can just tank through some attacks, which is good because you're kind of fucking slow. But you can just get hit and not end up on the ground, not end up getting stunned, and you can just do that to the enemy instead. And some of their attacks are just amazing. They're cool, they're brutal, they're big. You know, this is something if you're a great sword player in Monster Hunter, you're gonna love, you know. But you can still do your tank stuff. You can still grab the attention of the enemy. There are even augments that help you be more likely for enemies to be able, oh, the big guy with the sword over there, let's attack him instead of the mage back there. That's a far better decision for some reason. And then we hop into the sorcerer, which is your magic class if you just want to deal big damage. I've said big damage a lot. I've said a lot of damage a lot. That's kind of flowing into itself. But it's the truth, because you don't have the healing abilities of the mage. You can still do some support stuff with the enchantments and such. But I like to play a sorcerer when I really just want to do cool spells, you know. I want to vaporize things with fire, send down meteorites from the heavens, summon maelstroms to just toss smaller enemies around. You know, when I want to make fissures in the ground and just have the earth rise up and knock a foe to the ground. That's what I like to take part in when I'm playing as a sorcerer. Or I just want to levitate. You can levitate with mage too, but I decided to talk about in the sorcerer part. I like levitating. It can help you easily get to some chests, easily get to things, greatly beneficial, and it's just cool. Especially because it's better than before, because you can ascend and descend a lot better and get far higher up, and you can just be casting spells, shooting things from the sky. Fun experience. Now to the magic archer, our only returning hybrid class from the last game. And boy, I remember playing this class a lot because it was the best damage dealer in DD1. If you wanted to melt things, you played this. You put the proper time into magic archer in the original game, nothing's standing in your way. You take your bow, you're shooting magic everywhere, you're blowing stuff up, just fun. No way around it. It's fun. They changed a little bit now. It's slightly different. It can still do some big damage, but it's not the top of my... If I was making a tier list, it wouldn't be my top like it would be for DD1. Still fun, but not the same. Of course, it has the advantage over the regular archer that one, it has a lock on, and you can lock on to one enemy or 2 enemies, 3 enemies, 4 enemies. It's all up to you. You can target multiple parts of a monster, a big one, which can be helpful. You can easily do different elements of damage. You don't have to completely just rely on the enchantments that are given to you by your mage. Of course, there are some weapons that just have a natural enchantment that's been placed onto it, and when you find it in the world or buy it, it'll have that on it, but you get what I'm saying. It's a lot of flexibility in the type of damage you can do, and it can be very helpful if you decided, oh, fighting this monster, my mage does not have the enchantment type that is weak to, but I got that covered with one of my magic arrow abilities. I don't know why I said it like that. But yeah, you get what I'm saying. You got coverage. And then we hop on over to the Mystic Spear Hand, a solid replacement for the Magic Knight. I'm not gonna lie. It feels far easier to utilize both magic and melee than it did before. It's just naturally in your skill set with your basic, you know, light and heavy attack and your natural just class abilities. It allows you to easily teleport to enemies. You can stun them. You can send little bolts of magic out. You can throw objects at them just using your magic, basically like having like a force throw or force push ability. And you can throw smaller enemies as well. You usually have to either, well, kill them and just ragdolling their corpse into another one, which is good. Utilizing the physics of this game to just mess up enemies is a great idea. Throwing stuff is just wonderful. You throw things, deals a lot of damage, really helpful. And if you knock an enemy just kind of off balance, you can pick them up. At least if they're small. So you can throw them against a wall, or just throw them into water, which they're just going to instantly die if that happens. You can easily go into the back of enemies. You can do that with Thief as well, but this is also good as a good thing. I'm remembering stuff I should have said in other parts as well, but you know, the mind works strangely sometimes. And this is probably my favorite, just all around. I love the spear. I love everything about it. I love all the little animations where you're attacking someone. It's just fun. It's well balanced. You can deal a bunch of damage. It's just cool. Just aesthetically and visually, it is a cool vocation. And it was the one that really drew me in and had me, I was drooling. I was waiting to get my hands on this when I was watching the trailers and everything. And I'm glad it did not disappoint. The next one is, oh boy, the Trickster. The Trickster. Some people might love it, but it ain't really my cup of tea. I'll keep it honest with you, Chief. This class don't really deal no damage. It's about illusions. It's about throwing enemies off guard. You know, it is purely just kind of supporting. You're hoping that your pawns deal the damage. And pawns can deal damage. They learn. They get better over time. They're very capable. That's something DD1 had as well. They're good. They're smart. And there's some cool stuff. You can create illusionary walls, illusionary bridges, all that stuff. And just get enemies confused, make them attack each other. Create these little clones. But, you know, it just ain't my favorite. You know, there might be somebody out there who will sit down and they'll put 100 out, you know, in this class. You know, they'll hop in a new game plus, and as soon as they get to the first city and they can replace it, you know, they're going to be a trickster for 100 hours. You know, I couldn't see myself doing that. I got this class up to like level 5, and I was like, that's all. I gave it this fair shake, and I went on to level in the other vocations. You gotta be a very special type of person with a special mindset. Not like mentally ill, just different. But yeah, let's hop into the warfarer, the jack of all trades. You can equip any type of weapon, any type of armor, any type of skill from the other vocation. And really, you can equip multiple weapons at once. You do gotta fill up one of your skill slots. You only got 4 of those bad boys with a rearmament skill that allows you to switch from one to another. And it can be good. It gives you a lot of flexibility in how you want to play. Heck, you could even just go with one singular weapon and just be like, okay, I want to use the dual daggers, but I want to have some heavy armor on. You could do that with this. And you can play it as just your own custom class. There's a lot of good stuff you can do with this. And I played this a lot. It's only got like its own 2 little things, but it's fine. It's something that there's good potential there, and it's really fun. I like to be able to switch from using something quick, like the dual blades, to using something heavy, such as the greatsword, or go into my bow when I want to deal with something that's flying around, or even I want to do some magic, or switch to my beloved spear. So it's good for that. So there you go. That's done with vocations. Let's get into some other things. Some small, some big. Let's go. Let's talk about augments. These are what you get in your vocations. As you level up the vocation itself, you unlock different augments. And they do different things. Give you more stamina. Give you more gold. When you defeat an enemy, make it easier for you to grapple on the enemies, to climb them, to easily get out of the grip of an enemy that's dealing damage to you. When you get knocked down, because when you get knocked down, it can be hard to get up. But there are augments that help to do that faster. And when you get attacked, guess what happens? You lose a part of your overall health. There are augments that help with that, and they're all interchangeable. So once you unlock it by leveling up your vocation, you can put them on any vocation you want, which is pretty useful, and it's very necessary if you're trying to play a warfarer, because they got 2 of their own. They're both useful, but they only got 2, so you're gonna need to fill them slots up with some more. And I think they're good, they're useful. That's all I want to talk about with that. And now I want to hop on to the armor. The armor is different than before. Before you had layers, you know, you had multiple layers. You had your gloves, your undershirt, your top piece, your hat, your boots. You could have 2 different types of pants, you know, all that stuff. But now you're really kind of just left with helmet, body armor, leg armor, and a cape. Ain't a deal breaker for the game, but it's something that I'm gonna miss. You know, I feel like not enough games really do that anymore. It feels like something, if I go back and play like an older game here or there, maybe I could play some Morrowind. I got multiple pieces. I can have a robe, and then under that robe I can have some nice solid armor. And I think it would be really cool to have that, especially with the warfare and its flexibility. But hey, it is what it is. Ain't no reason to cry about it. Now let's hop into the enemy variety, or just enemies in general. I say enemy variety because there were some things online where people were saying, oh, there's not many enemies in this game. There's not a large variety of them. And I don't really see what those individuals are talking about. There are plenty of enemies. Yeah, you're gonna encounter goblins and harpies and gnolls frequently, and also my favorite giant salamanders as well. But it's not like there aren't plenty to do with those. They even have their own little variant that do different stuff, different type of attack, different types of damage. And that goes for the big enemies too. They have their own variety to them. There are plenty of things to fight, and I don't really see where that perception of things is coming from. Especially if you've played through the game any distance, you'll see a wide variety of things to fight. And there's different enemies to fight in the day, different enemies to fight at night. Some are only found in certain locations, like caves. There are unique monsters you might not fight very frequently. And when you get into the end game, depending on what path you're going for, there are different things you'll see, some cool fights. So that's just my thing. I don't know. And especially the enemies can do a lot more than they did before. Different attacks. They feel a lot more intelligent in how they tackle things and how they go about fighting you. And it does not take much to get messed up. All it takes is one wrong move. You're on the ground. You're getting stomped out. Like literally stomped out. Like a band of goblins that's just kicking the shit out of you because they knocked you over. And they got you in a corner and they're they're just they're giving you the poor adventurer in a manga treatment. Luckily, they're not giving you the hentai treatment. That'd be far worse. Though we talk about orcs or something, and some of these monsters, they do get very tensed up by men and some by women. So who knows? In lore, they probably would not treat you very well. The last two things to touch on are the visuals of the world. You know, I would have accepted if this game looked like the original from 2012. I would have been happy with that as long as things were improved. But this game does look good. It's beautiful. If it wasn't for those frame rate issues, those CPU limitations, things would be a lot better, but hey, that's what it is. I didn't really have any problems with it taxing my GPU, and I had things maxed out. It was looking good. And when you're out in the world and you get a good frame rate, and because there's not a bunch of humans rocking around doing their daily stuff, you're having a fun time. You're like, okay, hey, those some nice rock. Yeah, that's some nice water. Nice sky. Enemies got nice textures put on them. Nice effects on your weapons. I didn't play with ray tracing because I just didn't. I could, but it's like, hey, most of the games I play with ray tracing, it's like, ugh, they don't really do enough. And I've seen the ray tracing in this game. It's better than some, but not good enough to want to tank performance at anyone. As if we're talking about the beauty of the world, let's talk about the open world and the travel. The open world of DD1 was something that I was a fan of because it didn't feel useless, it didn't feel pointless, it wasn't big for the sake of being big, and they kept doing that in this game. They give you some extra travel options, so you don't just have to purely walk around. You know, you're still going to be using your fairy stones, your port crystals and such. Port crystals to set a location, fairy stones get to them. Fairy stones, they're more plentiful than last. You can buy from stores, they restock. Port crystals, you can get those if you gather the right resources, the right stuff. You get them cloned. I don't mean make a fake of them, no, you get them cloned through, there's a quest. I won't spoil it, but they're more plentiful, easier to get, so it'll be fine. You also got the ox cart. You can hop on one of those. You can go to a few different locations, so they give you a little bit more quality of life and travel. But I like the travel. I don't know why. I like having to be able to just walk around, not fast travel everywhere. It makes me actually explore the world, and there's plenty to see in the world. There's plenty of things to do. There's quests to find. There's particular monsters to encounter. There's just good stuff in the world. There's chests everywhere. Plenty of loot, and it's just fun. You know what? I will talk about quests. I just didn't want to talk about it really because I didn't want to spoil anything. But main story, good. Side quests, plenty of good. Did come across one I was like, oh, that sucks. Unless it was the escort ones where you just find a random person where you escort them. But you get a good chunk of change for doing it. Maybe get an item or something. So it ain't that bad. Or sometimes you come across people getting attacked by monsters. You help them, you get rewarded for it. So nothing feels useless. The main story is far more interesting than the first. It builds upon a lot of the same thing, but you see how the Arisen in this world is treated differently, especially in different areas. And there's just some other Arisen wandering around. That's not really a spoiler. It was something that exists in the first game. You'll come across it pretty easily. But hey, that's all I wanted to say. This was worth the wait. Hope to fix the issues. Hopefully get some DLC and maybe ramp up New Game Plus a little bit, make it a little bit more difficult, you know, have things scale better. But other than that, solid title. I'd recommend it. If you think your CPU might not be able to handle it, wait till they fix the problems and hopefully you'll have a good experience. And I think that once that's done and those problems are fixed, this should be a very positive game. And that's all. Thank you for listening to me ramble on. I'm trying to be more coherent than I usually do in other things. Might have still failed, but this should be a little bit better. So yeah, appreciate you watching. Like if you want, dislike if you want. It's up to you. Peace. I'm out.